Okay, so normally the word testimony does not bother me. I'm an attorney, I'm a judge, I deal with testimony, eliciting it, receiving it all the time, not anything that makes me nervous. But for years and years and years and years, whenever I would hear the word testimony at church, it didn't exactly make me real comfortable, because that meant somebody might ask me to give mine. And I really didn't know what I would say. You know, anytime I thought that one of the leaders was going to ask somebody to give testimony, if I got that sense from first one to look away, trust me. I'm not making eye contact. I do not want to be called on, okay? You know, and I kind of had my own pad response in mind. You know, I grew up in the church or whatever, right? Yeah, okay. No, I'm not making fun of it. It's okay. Those of you that are born pious and you know, perfect, that's just the way it is, we understand. So it really made me uncomfortable to think that I'm up here, because I have been up here with a lot of you since you were very young. And it really, you know, wasn't something that I was happy about, that I would not have an answer if somebody asked me to get up here and give my testimony. You know, I knew that I had walked with God, I knew that I had a relationship with God, and that I'd had that for a long time. But I really felt like there was a reason that I had that relationship that I was missing. Like I couldn't put my finger on it. And so it would make me nervous to think about the fact that I might not be able to give an answer. And it got me to reflecting and thinking, especially once I started coming up here and working with young kids and then with the youth. What is my testimony? What is my story? What would I tell somebody my walk with God is like or has been like? And you know, during this reflection, I came to learn a lot more about myself, about my growth, and it validated a lot of what I had believed once I kind of came to the realization of what my testimony is. And so I kind of want to share tonight with you what my walk has been about, and you know, kind of some specific things that in retrospect and reflecting, you know, that I missed when they were happening. But you know, in reflecting on them and looking back, you know, they were very significant things in my life that happened, and it just took a while for me to realize it. And so when the opportunity to speak in this series came up, I wasn't real, unlike Sean, you know, I guess he called like the moment it broke or whatever. You know, I didn't necessarily contact the leader, you know, contact Andrew and Emily right away. In fact, it was probably almost a couple of weeks before I even said anything, because I wasn't sure, you know, if and what I would talk about, and how it would fit into the series. Not that I didn't have something to say, because for a while I've kind of been wanting to talk about this in my walk, but I just didn't know if it would fit. And so I thought about it, I prayed about it, and there was a particular scripture that came to mind during my reflecting for this series, and that is in Matthew 13, and it's the parable of the farmer or the sower. And it's not short, but I'm going to read it, and then that's going to be the basis for talking and for what I'm going to share with you tonight. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it, while all the people stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let them hear. And continuing in verse 18, listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in their heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop, yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. And I know I've heard that story at least dozens of times in Sunday school and church, probably even within the context of youth group. And it seems pretty straightforward. It's talking about 4 different people and relating them to a farmer sowing his seeds. But for what I want to talk about and what I realized is that this scripture actually kind of presents a very close chronological outline of my life. And no, I don't have multiple personalities. I'm not 4 people, okay? That's not what I'm saying. Please don't take it that way. But really, and I think this could be true for a lot of people. In fact, when I was listening to Sean talk last week, the structure of this parable and the structure of people's lives, in a lot of ways, could kind of parallel this. Just on an individual basis and not necessarily in the way of 4 different people, as Jesus portrays it here when he initially tells it. And I say it's chronological because it really tracks the way that I developed and my walk with God. And it has shown me that development and my testimony and recognition of that is something that grows and will continue to grow throughout my lifetime. And from the time I was, up till about the time I was in 6th grade, I didn't really grow up in the church. Like, we went to church. My grandparents were founders of a non-denominational church, one of the founders of a non-denominational church down at 4th and Sheridan that no longer exists. That's where we attended church when we went. And that was not that frequently necessarily. And when it was, I really didn't want to go, to be quite honest with you. I didn't go enjoy the bathrooms like Sean did. I didn't have the executive key to the executive bathroom or whatever. But rather, it was almost a disdain when I would wake up on a Sunday that I knew that we were going to church. Because my mom and dad kind of had an interesting relationship when I was growing up, to say the least. And so my mom would want to go to church, and my dad would do everything he could to make it difficult to get us there in a timely manner or in a regular manner. And so as soon as we would wake up on Sunday morning, if we knew Mom wanted to go to church, Dad was going to sleep in later than he should have, or he would have anyway. I mean, it was just a production. And we always got there late. We were never on time. And the people, I would walk into Sunday school class, and I hated it because I would get there, and I knew these other kids had been coming regularly, and they were just about ready to kick my butt in whatever Bible trivia game we were getting ready to play, and I'm going to look like a donkey because I know nothing, right? Because we don't go to church regularly, and I'm not like going home and studying my Bible like on my own or anything, so it just was not enjoyable to me. And my mom would always say, once you get old enough to go to youth group and get into that, it'll be better, you won't, it'll be, I don't know how that's possible because we'll be the same kids, but okay, Mom. But, I did not have an understanding. I mean, I was there, but I didn't understand really what was going on. I didn't care to really understand what was going on. And much like the seed that fell along the path, there was no soil for any roots to grow in me at that time. I went because we had to go. You know, I wasn't going to be able to tell my mom no. It's just the way it was. But, you know, we would drive all the way across town to 4th and Sheridan, which, by the way, we lived out by the NSU campus. And, like, there weren't highways and stuff like you guys have now, okay? We had to drive, like, a dirt road, actually. And it was like an adventure to get over to 4th and Sheridan. It's like a 15-minute drive like it can be now. So, you know, it was a pain. You know, getting to church on Sundays was a pain. And then we started playing sports as we got a little older even, and then, you know, that was our only day off because I got 2 younger brothers, and Mom and Dad are taking us to 3 different, you know, sporting events on the weekends. I mean, it was a hassle. So I didn't enjoy it at all. So, you know, I always felt like my canned answer if I grew up in church. Yeah, I grew up going to church occasionally, but to say that I was there and enjoying and taking in and understanding what was going on would be completely wrong. And I didn't feel good about that. So I knew I needed to find out and to figure out why I felt the way that I did and why I have had the walk that I've had with Christ. And my mom was partially right. Once I got old enough to start going to youth group at the same church, it got a little better. But that's mainly because I had some cousins that were Union grads, Terry and Carrie Kirkwood.
Go Red Hawks!
Yeah. And another cousin that went to the high school with Andrea and I, and their grandparents were part of this church too, so they started coming to church a little more regularly. And we would kind of go, and we went more regularly. It was more fun. Can I tell you that, like, I really got a whole lot out of it, but I would not necessarily go there. But it was during this time that, you know, from the time I was probably in about 6th to 7th grade up until I was probably a junior in high school, that I really feel like I started to come to know Christ. I was, for lack of a better term, I was saved when I was 15. It happened at an FCA event in Stillwater, nonetheless.
Nice.
At an OSU game,
Woo!
which I'm pretty sure I probably got to see Barry run for who knows how many yards afterwards. So
Who wouldn't see God?
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, there you go, buddy. So I don't know if I want to get away from the smell, if that's why I was praying, or if it was because I was accepting Jesus. But in any event, I was saved. I got baptized that same year. It was my freshman year. And it was during this time that, you know, I accepted it. I was at least outwardly zealous. We had a youth service at the church. I preached a sermon. You know, it was on Carpe Diem, by the way, because Dead Poet Society just got released that day. And so, go ahead and laugh, Bill. But, you know, outwardly, I was doing, saying everything that would tell somebody, you know, this guy's walk is good. But I wasn't necessarily comfortable yet. You know, I had accepted Christ, but there was still part of me that said, there's something that I haven't figured out that's not there. And during this time, I'll say also, I probably was the best athletic and academic time of my life. You know, I won a state baseball title. I was outstanding wrestler at the conference wrestling tournament. Academically, I was doing very well in school, and it was a good time. It was a fun time. Andrea and I met at that time. We didn't date, but that was when we first met. It was during that time period, and I was hearing it, I was receiving it, but I wasn't cultivating anything. I don't think. Yeah, there you go. That's during this time actually. So that was either freshman or sophomore year. We trying to figure that out the other day. But you know, I just wasn't. The roots weren't growing. You know, and it was just like during that time. It was just like in the scripture, the seed that went on the rocky soil. It sprouted up. It grew. But it didn't keep growing, and it didn't develop roots because the soil was shallow. I didn't have soil, for crying out loud. I just told you guys that up until I was 12, I really didn't like going to church. So, you know, there was no soil there. There wasn't a whole lot that I could do with it. So eventually it kind of died off. And you know, later in high school and then into college, you know, there came a time when, you know, life just kind of gets in the way. You know, later in high school, you're thinking about getting into college, you're thinking about doing other things, where you're going to go, what you're going to do. It didn't help that my sophomore year, my first varsity year wrestling, about the time wrestling season started, my dad goes to rehab in Chicago, and he's gone for 3 months and missed most of my first season. And so there was things going on that, you know, life gets in the way, and you just kind of make do, so to speak. There's a lot that's out of your control, obviously. And, you know, once I turned 16, 17, I kind of put my focus into, hey, you know, I want to try to, I built a good academic base. Wrestling had become how I was going to get into college at that point. It had gone from being my weakest sport to my strongest sport. And that's where my focus shifted to. And so, you know, I had said since I was very young, I mean, if you would have asked me in the first grade where I'm going to go to college, I would have told you Harvard. And I would have told you I was going to be a lawyer. That would have been my answer, okay? And no, I did not go to Harvard, but I did go to Cornell. And it's in the same conference as Harvard. So, you know, and the way I got in there is about as crazy as you can imagine, because, you know, back then we didn't have videos of ourselves that we posted online that we would send to coaches, and that's how you get into or get noticed, you know. I get these mailers because of academics. You know, they send you catalogs, and colleges do. I don't know if they still do that anymore. It's probably all on email now. But I used to have a stack of catalogs in the corner from all these like tiny, you know, 2A, you know, Div 3 type schools and stuff. But I got one from Cornell, and I literally tore out the little pre-postage postcard on the inside of that catalog and put, you know, 6 out of 913 what I'd done in wrestling to that point, and stuck it in the mail. And I don't know, a couple weeks later, I'm laying in bed, my dad comes back, and he says, "Hey, you got a coach on the phone." Okay. So I go in, it's Jack Spades, and you know, that's how I got to where I was. I mean, it was literally sending in a postcard, man. I mean, that's not like wrestling coaches had a big recruiting budget to where they'd come watch you or fly you out or do anything like that. You know, we're still operating on VHS at that time, so, you know, it's not like you had videos you could send in, like I said, or no thumb drives going through the mail. So, you know, literally, that's how I got there. Wow. And so, you know, that was what my focus was during that time period. And when I was in college, I actually went to a really, really small Southern Baptist affiliated church for a while. That was probably like, I don't know, 25 people in the whole church, you know, but that was kind of where I felt comfortable for whatever reason. I went there some, not a lot, but I really didn't put that much effort into it. You know, there was other things going on in my life. At that point now, I want to get into law school because that's what I want to do. And so, you know, wrestling wasn't going to get me there. So I knew I was going to have to make sure I made the grades and did what I needed to do academically, and that's where my focus shifted. And so, you know, Christ got kind of pushed to the back burner during that time period. You know, really until I got out of college and even probably, you know, when I first started law school. I always felt like Christ would take care of me. I applied to one law school. I took the LSAT one time, I applied to one law school. It was stupid. Don't anybody do that. Don't put all your eggs in one basket like that. But honest to goodness, I was never concerned about it. And I think Andrea would probably, you know, we were together at that time, she would probably tell you, yeah, I didn't worry. For whatever reason, I did not worry about that. It wasn't like I had a stellar LSAT either, so it just, I was very fortunate. But I always felt like God would take care of me. And I didn't know why, but, that's the way I felt. After, senior year of college, Andrea and I finally started dating. And cross country, however that works. Got engaged and got married after a year of law school. And that's when I started coming here. Was with her. We got married in this church. This is the first church that I've regularly attended in my life. I've been doing it for a while now, but this is the first one. And so, I had started to transition from that third phase where the thorns were, and life and wealth and life's concerns were choking me out. I started kind of transitioning from that because Andrea and I wanted to start a family, and so that's what we wanted to do, and we started attending church here, and we were fortunate enough to have the girls, and I was told when they were 5 that I had to come up here on Wednesdays because she had class, and at that time, in her world, when her and Emily were going to church here years ago in the youth group, like the way you got to go on mission trip, this is my understanding anyway. Maybe I was duped, I don't know. But the way you got to go on mission trip was you had to come volunteer basically. So my wife is like, get your butt up there, you got to be a placeholder. I may not let you go, it may be me, but you're going to go work and be with the girls. Okay? So, that allowed me, once I got here, that allowed me to start cultivating my relationship with Christ. And it allowed me to start learning and be more reflective and to start growing those roots in Him and with Him. And that is where I finally, hopefully, have come to start knowing and at least attempting to understand what it means to have that walk with Christ. I feel like now that I'm like the fourth man in the Scripture, that I'm someplace where I can grow and let my roots develop and start reaping benefits of my relationship with God. And I've felt that way for a while now, but I've always, until really fairly recently, I wouldn't say too recently, but in the last couple of years, I really still felt like there was something missing, like I was missing something, like there's got to be something that happened, I still didn't feel like I had my testimony, I didn't feel like it was done, what I wanted to find out that I wanted to say. And so, I would reflect on it periodically and think about it, because like I said, at this point now, I might get asked by one of these people to get up here and talk like this, so I better have something to say, right? And hopefully not be lying to you guys. And so, I still was reflective about things. Went on the first mission trip that I'd ever been on to Ohio, and that was the first time I think I remember hearing anyway with any recollection the phrase God sighting. And it wasn't something that hit me right away or anything, but I started trying to incorporate that more in my daily life and looking for that, and because I'd led a fairly, what I would call fairly charmed life to that point, and even to this point, but I was very thankful, very lucky. But like I said, I still didn't have my reason, if you will, my real reason that I have this relationship I have with God. And at some point, I don't know when, probably a couple years ago, I got to thinking about, what got me here? What was the driving force? What got me to where I'm at today? If God provides for us, and I felt like He always provided for me, you know, this is what he provided in my life that spurred me to get me here. And I mentioned earlier that wrestling at one point was my weakest sport. And after my 7th grade year, I started in 3rd grade. After 7th grade, my mom and dad called me to the kitchen table. I'll never forget it. We're both sitting there at the kitchen table. And I'll say I think I was a pretty easy kid to raise relative to having to worry about them. Like, my dad will tell you I never did homework. I mean, my parents never had to help me with homework, for sure. I kind of took care of myself, you know, and but they called me to the kitchen table and they said, look, we're sick of you crying all the time. Because I was a freaking whiner like you would not believe, okay? I mean, if I was losing a match and I knew it was done, man, it wasn't because I was anything but mad, really, because I was not in control of that situation and I was going to lose, and I just was, you know, like Ralphie on the Christmas Story when he's on top of the dude punching and balling at the same time. Okay, that's the way it was, okay? And so they said, we're sick of, you know, it's embarrassing, basically. We're sick of seeing you do this. And so, at that point, it was, I wrestled, played football and baseball. Wrestling was the weakest of the three. I said, okay. I said, well, you know, let me think, you know, I was 12 and 12 that year, 7th grade. And so, at some point, and you guys are probably going to think I'm making some of this up, but my younger brother actually confirmed it with my girls here on a fishing trip a couple of years ago, so they'll tell you I'm not lying about this. At some point, we took a family trip to Eureka Springs. And we're walking around town, right? And for whatever reason, we're in this one shop. And there is this, I'm not making this up, a little Jewish guy, East Coast, from New York. And he is selling fake gold chains off of like a roll, like you buy at Lowe's or something, you know, like you buy actual chain, you know, like for work at Lowe's, you know, like on a spool. You guys know what I'm talking about, okay? This guy's got like yards and yards of fake gold chain on these spools, right? And he's probably got, I don't know, 9, probably herringbone, rope, you know, whatever you want, man. And for whatever reason, this guy's in this shop in Eureka Springs. And I don't know what in the world spawned me and my dad and my brother talking to this guy. Well, I do know because I was looking at the chains, right? And my dad, I'm sure, said something about me and my brother wrestling or whatever. And so this guy starts talking to us, tells us he's from New York and from New York City. And he's talking about he wasn't a very good athlete, etc. But at his high school, they had this thing on the wall where it was a big deal to get your name up there for the most push-ups, for having done the most push-ups. I'm like, why is this guy telling me this stuff, right? I mean, I'm you know, 13 years old, whatever. I'm like, dude, I just want to buy a freaking fake gold chain. I'll tell you in a minute why I wasn't happy about having to talk to the dude about the chain. But anyway, you know, this guy starts telling. And at some point, he actually pulls his pant leg up and shows his calves, which they're very standard sized calves, man. I'm making this up. This dude's like 60. And why he showed that when he's talking about push-ups, no idea. But anyway, he starts talking, and he starts telling me that, you know, he was going to get his name up on the wall. That was his goal in high school. And so he started researching how to do push-ups. And he researched how the martial artists do them, okay? Like Bruce Lee, these guys, right? And so eventually, he worked it to where he could do it was like 936 push-ups. Yeah, it was not a small number, people. I mean, this was an impressive number. Okay, that's a lot for those of you that don't know how many 936 push-ups is. I'm talking consecutive. I'm not talking resting in between sets or anything like that, okay? And you know, it's not like I can validate what this guy's telling me. We'd have to Google in 1985 or whatever. It's not like I go, oh, is this the way to do these push-ups? You know what this guy's telling me? I'm like, so at that time it kind of went in one ear out the other. But you know, as kind of the spring, summer went on, I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to put one more shot into wrestling this year. And for whatever reason, I started trying to do the push-ups that he described. Now, these things, that what he described to me, in my mind, is an impossibility, okay? What he described to me was feet in a chair, rotating arms each time, body one way, head the other way, okay? And all synchronized. Dude, I could rotate arms. That's as far as it got, okay? I could alternate which arm I went down on and put my feet in the chair. Other than that, the rest of the whole stuff wasn't happening, okay? There's no way I'm that coordinated. You try it, get ready to laugh at yourself, because it's not, kids, yeah. But I did, I started working out. And all I did was push-ups, that's all I did. And 8th grade year, I lost 3 matches, was outstanding wrestler. And to say it changed the trajectory of my life would probably be an understatement. I mean, this is a random chance meeting in Eureka Springs with some little Jewish peddler selling fake gold off of a freaking spool, okay? Which leads me to send in a postcard to Cornell, okay? At some point down the road. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, you know, that really, in retrospect, was my first God sighting that I would remember anyway. And what was even more strange about it is I wouldn't have been there talking to the guy, but that Christmas, or my birthday or Christmas one, they were real close together, I had asked for and gotten a real gold rope necklace with a cross on it. That, guess what I did, Ashton? I put it in a locker at South that didn't have a lock on it during wrestling practice.
Uh-oh.
And when I got done with practice, it wasn't there anymore. It had gotten stolen. And it was because of that I'm talking to this guy. Now, why I didn't figure that out at the time, well, I know why, because I wasn't paying attention. But we're not understanding, we're both. But it was because of that I was even talking to this guy that tells me some ludicrous story about doing 900 some odd push-ups to get his name on the freaking wall, that for whatever reason spoke to me and motivated me. And, you know, in retrospect, as I'm trying to figure out, for me, you know, what my story is and what led me to my belief and the beliefs that I have in my walk with Christ, I don't think I'd get hit over the head any harder than that. You know, I mean, it's almost not real in some ways to me, even to tell that story. It almost feels like I said, like I make it up, because it's almost too good to actually be true. But that is the way it happened. You know, but for you know, me meeting that guy, talking to that guy, and you know, part of this scripture is that it's not just important to hear what God tells us, but to understand. When I read that, I thought of a great example. When I was in college, I ran the concessions for the university. I was a student manager for 3 years, my sophomore and senior year. And I took it over from a guy from Midwest City that had been doing it, and he was a hotelier, and he'd done all these spreadsheets. All I had to do was keep on autopilot, man. It was a great student. It was a great work-study job. And there was this guy, though, local towny guy in Ithaca there, that he was an adult, probably on a little slow side, and he would come to all the basketball games. And he would come up to you at a basketball game, you know, random people, whatever, and he would say, "Are you shattered?" Now, the first time he said this to you, you'd be looking at him like, what bust a loopy deal did this guy just get off of, right? Because he was probably, I mean, it was just like, what? Am I shattered? What are you talking about, dude? Well, super nice guy once you got to know him. And he would explain to you at that point, when he says, "Are you shattered?" you're supposed to respond with Shadoobie. And then he will respond with Kobe. And then you are supposed to respond with Shabrowski. And then he would conclude with, you got the lingo, man. Now, don't have, I can, if there's a Rolling Stones song called Shattered, okay? And it has several of those words in it, okay? There's a couple of those words that aren't in that song. So where this cat got this stuff, I have no idea, okay? But it was great because once you knew it, once you knew it and knew him, he would come up to you and you'd be standing by somebody that didn't know what you were doing, and he'd come up to you and say, you shattered, and you'd do this little thing with him, and he'd be looking at you going, what in the world? Man, if you get it, you get it. Just walk off, right? And I thought of that guy when I was reading the scripture about how it's important that we hear and understand, because it's the understanding and knowing what's being said to you and what the conversation is about, regardless of if anybody else does. And it may not always make perfect sense to you, but as long as you're having a conversation and you're in the conversation, that's good. That's a good thing. And I can't help but think back to all of the good fortune that I have had in my life, and think that, but for meeting that guy, peddling fake gold chains, there's a lot of things I probably wouldn't have in my life today. A lot of things I probably wouldn't have in my life today. There's no guarantee I get to school where I got. There's no guarantee that I have the profession that I have, that I have the family and the things that I have. And why I was there, all that is like I said, it's unbelievable to me, but at the same time, it is the story and the testimony that was given to me. And I wanted to share that with you guys tonight. So, thank you.